Welcome to another video. I'm Joseph, this is Pierre, and today we're going to be doing a podcast for the One Good Road channel, and we're going to be talking about the topic of camping, more specifically wild camping. So I have some Q&As questions and answers that we will be providing. We'll do that a bit later on. Pierre is going to talk about camping in France. He spent many hundreds of years living here compared with me, and we've also done some hiking together, so we have some experience with camping while we did some hiking, so we'll get into that as well. We'll start off with the hiking we've done previously, I think. So recently, before all of this isolation time that we're all going through, we did a hike from from Foix, well actually a bit closer than that, but Foix to the Mediterranean coast, and it was along a special route called the Cathar Trail in the south of France. And that took us about, let's say, 2 weeks roughly to do, and we had some storms and we were camping every night until we got to the beach. Then we had an Airbnb. So maybe we can give some tips on the wild camping in France, I guess, and talk about what we did to try and stay away from, because in France I don't think it's legal for camping, as far as I'm aware.
No, it's not. Wild camping is usually not allowed, but a lot of people are doing it anyway. We did it as well.
Yeah, I mean...
But because it was in a period where all was shut, no campsite, no... And it was quiet
low season.
As well.
I mean, you have to avoid, obviously, being in towns. That's a major thing. That's what I noticed. And every time we arrived there, we got all the food that we needed. And then, I mean, you could maybe sleep on a park bench if you wanted to, but we didn't do that. We just went down the road, out of town, back onto the Cathar Trail, the special hiking trail, and then we just found a flat level place to pitch a freestanding tent. We didn't use a bivvy tent. It was a one-man tent, which was a bit weird, and that was way too small. I'm not doing that ever again. It's just so small, too narrow. You can't. It gets bad real fast. So we did value our own space. The next time we'll be taking separate tents. But yeah, we just tried to stay out of sight. The old phrase we have in English is out of sight, out of mind. That's what we did a lot of the time. And it's a shame that it's not really legal in France. I think that's really silly, personally. But that's just the way that it is out here. When you're in the mountains, though, I think it's a bit different. Maybe when you're in a national park.
I don't know, but I think it's not allowed because the fire. It's the main thing. They keep the people out of the natural space. If you're in a camping site, it's okay because they have all the facilities.
Designated
prevention for fire and stuff.
Right. I mean, yeah, south of France is more dry, so it makes sense. So yeah, we did a lot of camping on that trip, and for me it was hygiene, which was quite an important thing. Since we weren't staying at designated campgrounds, it was hard to keep clean. Luckily, we just came across a lot of rivers, fresh flowing rivers, and we would strip down, get clean, get that sorted, do it as quickly as possible because it was not that warm. And I have a link to the whole documentary. I'll leave that down below of the whole trip that we did. It was a beautiful trip. I was so surprised because we've been down that way so many times. We've even biked that route as well. And going by foot was very strange and different, and it was totally different perspective.
Yeah.
We sometimes lit a fire sometimes at night, which is weird for me because I don't normally do that. If I go on my own in my previous travels, I don't really light a fire. I just put up with the cold and eat cold food. But it was really nice to appreciate warm food when we had the fire.
Yeah.
That was something to consider if you want more comfort as well.
But it adds more weight if you want to bring the gas thing and
the stove. Yeah.
yeah, the little stove. About the stuff we bring is important to notice that if it's very light stuff and we keep the essential, the very basic stuff that we need, it's better than to carry all your kitchen there and you know.
Only the necessities.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is true. We were learning on each day, I would say. Plus a lot of prior knowledge in my previous tours by bikepacking, which I was thinking to do a podcast about bikepacking as well, because I get so many comments about it and answering a few of those questions. But I thought camping is much more relatable right now for me, since this whole weird isolation thing. We can't do that much outdoor activity, but we can go camping, which is funny in all of this weirdness. And we have a forest like literally behind us, which is really lovely, and we hike around there when we can. Yeah. So yeah, maybe we'll jump into the questions, I think, now, and I'll just blaze through some of the questions that I get, because I get them quite a lot, and some of them I hadn't answered in like 3 months, so I felt kind of bad not answering them. So this one's from Brian Wolf. Are there many restrictions on camping along the way? And he's responding to an old bikepacking video I have of bikepacking the whole length of New Zealand. There aren't that many restrictions, I think, in national parks in New Zealand, but when you're on the South Island, lots of people camp on there with camper vans, and it's not really recommended. Like, locals don't really want you to do it, but they don't really have a choice because so many people rent a camper van. And as far as I know, as long as you're out of sight, out of mind in New Zealand, then you can camp pretty much anywhere. So the next one's from Jim Jones. I've stumbled across your channel and I'm intrigued by the whole idea of bikepacking. I'm curious, how did you find the camping in Australia? The reason I ask is because I think the wildlife would scare the crap out of me. I'm not sure what the wildlife is in Reunion like, but in Australia it's renowned for being the animals that can kill you. Yeah. Hostile, yeah. But from my experience, at the beginning I was very nervous about it, but then once you get used to it, you firstly realize Australia is really empty. So there's really not that much wildlife in the first place. And then secondly, if you do it in the right time of year, in around winter time where it's cooler and not so hot, all the reptiles are more hunkered down during winter, then you don't really come across any wildlife, including people as well. So in summertime, as long as you pick somewhere which is well cleared and it doesn't have a lot of debris like leaves and stuff like that, and you just avoid brown snakes, those are the worst, and they are the most common. As long as you avoid those snakes, it's going to be fine. Redback spiders, they hide into dark places like shoes and stuff like that. So every morning you'd take your shoes, you'd bash them out.
You check?
Yeah, you check every morning.
And did you add the antidote poison in case?
Oh, no. They keep that in the hospitals. So if you do get if you get bitten, you call the emergencies, and sometimes it can take maybe 6 hours for them to show up. It depends on how far you are from the next city. And they'll either take you by plane or helicopter to the next village, or if it's really serious, or they'll take you by ambulance. And I mean, you want to avoid the ambulance because sometimes those bites can kill a man in like something like 8 hours or something like that. It's pretty short. But again, if you just avoid them, they don't really go looking for people. That's not. In fact, I think you'd be more worried about traffic than you would be about the animals, to be completely honest. Maybe even kangaroos are more dangerous than some of those spiders. I did see a huntsman spider, which is about this big, as I was pitching up my tent, and that was a bit nerve-wracking. But as soon as you make a movement, it sort of scurries away very quickly. And if you're inside your tent, you're not really going to see them anyway. And I was on a bike most of the time, so you don't really see them.
And what about the water that you carry in Australia? Because sometimes you have to do far distance between two shops or two towns.
Yeah, between towns can average between as low as 80 kilometers all the way up to 180 kilometers. So you really did have to carry quite a lot of supplies, mainly water, that's right. The settlements are usually called roadhouses, that's the name for them. And as long as you arrive at a roadhouse by the end of the day, you're going to be fine. Some places sell you bottled water, you can't even just use a tap. And I carried about 5 liters of water on my bike. I sort of spread out the load, so because I was doing bike packing. In fact, he commented, this guy Jim Jones, on one of my setup videos. So I'll leave a link probably down below where you can have a look at that. Then we'll just answer one more question, and then we'll wrap it up with maybe some tips in camping in France. Bike touring Mike, he asks, great way to reuse old footage. I did a tour of the Åland Islands in summer myself, and I can definitely agree that cycling there is great. There's just not a lot of roads. Okay, this isn't really a question, but I remember that. Okay, he says, regarding wild camping in Sweden, it's called the Allmans Saten, I think. Every man's right to roam. And regarding Swedish forests, 25% of them are owned by the government, and 75% is private land or by companies. That's kind of interesting because, I mean, he's commenting on an old video where I was bikepacking in Finland on the Åland Islands, and they are between Sweden and Finland. And it's a gorgeous place, but he's right, there's not a lot of roads to ride on. But in Scandinavia, the whole peninsula up north in Europe, you can camp anywhere. It's the Allmans Act. It's like he says it's every man's right to roam. So it's also the same in Scotland. Scotland has a similar law that you can camp anywhere. I know in Scotland though you can't light any fires. That's all. And then in Sweden it's amazing. I mean, you can just go in the forest, but you need to avoid camping near lakes because mosquitoes will be around those lakes. It's quite, especially in summer. It's not really a question again, but it's a useful bit of information. I'll just see if I can snap out one more comment. This guy's asking about, this one's called Bike Vids. It's a pretty basic name. He's commenting on a Norway documentary video, and he's asking, where do you camp? And again, in all of Scandinavia, you can camp pretty much anywhere as long as it's not on private land. And even then, there's this weird thing where trespassing. I mean, in the UK, you can't. If you're trespassing on someone's land and the owner says you can't be here, technically you can just stay there and you don't. I mean, the cops can't really prosecute you. It's a weird law. I think it's really stupid. I don't think it should be like this, but because I mean, what do homeless people do? You know, every night they have to camp. They have to sleep somewhere. It's a pretty weird world that we live in. The sun has just set behind us, but Pierre, if you can just reiterate what you were saying about camping here, what your tips are, and just to finish it off.
I was saying just to not underestimate what you have to bring because of it can be cold, it can be a storm during the day, so bring a jacket, waterproof, and light stuff, but don't underestimate, because if you recover good the night, it's better for the walk or the
hike or the trip.
yeah, for the next day. So prepare good enough before to go.
Yeah, I would say like to be comfortable at night.
Yeah,
Is really important.
basic, but the most comfortable possible.
Yeah, on a budget.
Yeah,
included on that. All right, so I'll leave it at that. Please leave your comments down below if you want us to answer some more questions. Anything bike related or touring related, traveling related, or maybe again camping. If you have any topic ideas we could talk about, leave them below. And that's it for our first podcast. We have another podcast on our other channel, the One Good Production. And it's a very different podcast, talking and expressing feelings. Might be interested to watch that. I'll leave a link up there. And that's it for now.